All right, and we are live. So, welcome everyone who's jumping on. I am excited today to have with me Sam Broverman, who is an actuarial professor at the University of Toronto. He's also written several different study guides for some of the actuarial exams. In addition, he also has a musical background, which we'll dive into as well. So thank you for joining, Sam.
Thanks
And
for having me. Looking forward to a fun interview.
definitely. And just so the audience is aware, we've had a few different technical glitches with our network here going out. So if we have any issue, we'll let you know. Sometimes it I don't know on your end if you can see it or not, but on our end, sometimes it'll slow down or we can't see each other. So on that note, though, Sam, why don't you give us a little couple sentence background about yourself, and then we'll kind of dive on in.
I did graduate studies, PhD studies in mathematics. Got a PhD in 1976 in area of more theoretical math, point set topology and set theoretic topology. Also, I've been a musician, worked as a professional musician since my teenage years. I made my way to the actuarial side of the mathematical spectrum, partly as a result of an older brother who's an actuary. When I was an undergrad, he encouraged me to take some of the actuarial exams and said, "This is a good way to get yourself a decent summer job." So I did that, and it theoretical math studies. And when I finished and started looking for work, I had a fellowship at University of Toronto for 2 years till '78. And when I started looking for a more permanent university job, they seemed to be more prevalent in the actuarial area, which I'd had a fair amount of background in. And so I wouldn't say totally abandoned at the time, but I moved over to the actuarial side. And my first job as an academic, my first academic job was at the University of Texas at Austin, where I worked for 2 years. It was a lot of fun. And then a job came open in Toronto, and I thought hard about what to do. And I came back to Toronto. I've been a prof since 1980 at University of Toronto on the actuarial side.
That's
And
awesome.
also have maintained interest in music, although that took a back seat for a number of years. The demands of an academic career kind of took over for a while, but
Sure,
last
sure.
number of years I've been more active musically again.
That's awesome. So how would you compare Toronto to where you lived in Texas?
They're both U of T, so that's probably where the similarity
That's a good
ends.
point.
Texas is almost a country of its own, and there's similarities in culture. You can find a McDonald's in Toronto pretty easily. Thing in Texas, and aside from the the southern drawl accent, which I started to adopt after a little while there, kind of lost it. Texas in general is more conservative area, conservative even in the realm of U.S. and
Right.
compared to politically, Canada is a little less conservative in general. But my wife and I were there. We were welcomed. I could have stayed. I would have been happy to stay, but the University of Toronto made me an offer I couldn't refuse. So I really did like Texas, and in fact, I particularly enjoyed the great music scene in Austin.
Oh, I believe that's because that's what I was going to ask you about. Because yeah, Austin has a big music scene.
Music. I got to see Willie Nelson a couple of times live. He owned at that time he owned a concert venue called the Opera House, and he would have concerts, a week long series of concerts around Christmas time each year. So I went to see both Christmases I was there. That was really a lot of fun.
I bet that was. That's really cool. So then to kind of back up, you said what really kind of spurred you into the actuarial route was your brother. Did you say your brother was an actuary himself, or
Yeah,
he was
yeah.
aware of it?
I guess some might classify it as a family illness. I have a brother who's a statistician. He's retired now, and a brother who's an actuary who's retired now.
Okay.
So it's sort of just carrying on a family tradition, I
Sounds
suppose.
like it. Wow. So was your PhD, you said, was that in mathematics then?
Yeah, it was in more theoretical area of mathematics,
Okay.
topology. Yeah.
And then going into like teaching actuarial, did you then after you got your PhD, did you go in and take some of the actuarial exams, or how did you kind of get your foot in the door with teaching actuarial science?
Well, I started taking actuarial exams when I was an undergrad, and I was studying more theoretical math at the time. But I took some courses. I was at the University of Manitoba, which
Okay.
has celebrated I think its 100th anniversary in the actuarial program not too long ago, and so they had a well-established actuarial program, and I took some courses in that as part of my overall mathematical studies, and I started taking actuarial exams, and actually my first exam was 1970, and I continued taking them because it gave me opportunity for a good summer job.
Yeah.
Student, and I didn't really know at the time where things would lead me. I loved studying theoretical math, and as I say, an older brother was encouraging me to take the exam, so I did that as well. And then when the time came and I wanted to stay in the academic world, I did have opportunities in the professional actuarial world, but I like the academic world, and I still do. So I was looking to stay on that side, and as it turns out, and it still seems to be the case, there are good opportunities in academia, in universities for people with the right background and that can teach actuarial courses. And so, in fact, when I came to Toronto to do a fellowship, a 2-year fellowship, which was still in the area of theoretical math that I did, I had the background in actuarial, and the courses I taught were actuarial courses as opposed to a lot of times if you're on a postdoctoral fellowship, you'll get tossed into a first-year calculus course.
Right. Yep.
So I got tossed into introductory actuarial courses, and so that's
Okay.
what sort of got some experience. And then I had that when I went to Texas and was full time in the actuarial academic world.
Wow. No, that's really interesting because since myself, I'm interested in teaching actuarial science at some point as well. From talking to a lot of people that I know in the academic world, it sounds like there is a lot of demand for actuarial science professors.
That's true. I see ads coming by from different universities all over North America.
Yeah.
Right. Not so much Europe, although I don't follow the demand for actuarial profs there as much. But it is if you're a potential prof and you're selling your services, it is a seller's market.
Yes.
The right stuff, chances are you'll find a job.
That's really interesting. And I don't know the full reason why, but I would guess that like a lot of people that go the actuarial route, they can make, such good money in the corporate world doing what they're doing, and they've trained so hard to do that many people may not want to go back to the academic side, and they, study so long with schooling, with exams, that maybe that's partly why there's a lack of professors and why there's a need, do you think?
There's partly that. I would also say that my experience looking back over the years, especially earlier on when I started in the actuarial academic world, seemed that most of the academic actuaries that I knew had a background in more theoretical math.
Yeah.
And so they were academics, and they, for whatever reason, wanted to stay in the academic world.
Yes.
And moved into the actuarial side, and some of them sort of straddled and did consulting work in
Sure.
industry.
Sure.
But for the most part, at that time, a lot of the academics were had a theoretical math background. In more recent years, as the overall academic world for actuaries has grown, there are more and more programs that produce PhDs with a specialty in an actuarial or financial or risk, financial risk area.
Yes.
And so for them, they're just continuing their academic career in the field in which they were trained. You know,
That makes sense.
University of Toronto, we probably have on average one or two students at any time who are doing PhD studies in an actuarial or financial risk area.
Okay.
And there are several other programs across North America and Europe as well. And so there are programs that are creating people for that specific discipline, as opposed to people coming from a related discipline.
Yeah, I could see that. Interesting. So, to kind of go to I know you have the actuarial side, and I know your passion has also been music. And I'm curious, did this music thing start while you were in school? Did you start performing like, back in high school, undergrad, back in those days, and then kind of continue that along, or was that more a little bit later?
I was always drawn to music from the time I was a child. My mom was a piano teacher. Not that I was a particularly good piano student at the time. It's tough to be.
I had to take piano lessons for about 3 years when I was a kid. I wish I would have continued, but I didn't.
Yeah, but really, I loved singing more, and so I did that in choirs, in bands, in musicals. I did that throughout grade school, high school, university, and I started working professionally in Winnipeg while I was a teenager, and continued that through my university studies. I worked professionally I worked on a couple of nationally televised shows in Canada that were out of Winnipeg. And the fact that, for a relatively small course, nationally televised, you get paid pretty well. And in fact, it helped pay my way through graduate school.
Oh, really? That's amazing.
Yeah. So that, that worked out pretty well. But then, when it came time to really seriously pursue an academic career, I didn't stop being involved in music, but I really had to, budget my time in a different way.
Sure.
So for many years, what I did living in Toronto was I'm a member of a choir, a large choir that performs with the Toronto Symphony, and so we do, we do several concerts a year with the Toronto Symphony, and it kept things up at a pretty good level of musicianship, but it wasn't back to the solo type work that I did. And in the last number of years, I've done more of that, and I've even had a chance to combine a little bit of my mathematical background with my musical background. A few years ago, I don't know if you know, the Actuarial Research Conference is an annual meeting sponsored by the it's part of the Society of Actuaries.
Yeah. Yep.
It's going to be it's in Indianapolis. It's in a few weeks. It's in early August in Indianapolis. Okay. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to go this year, but I've often gone. And University of Toronto hosted it in 2015. 2015 we hosted it, and it was it turned out it was actually the 135th anniversary of the actuarial program at University of Toronto. I've been there most of those 135 years, I think. But
wow, that program's been around for quite a while.
Yeah, it's the oldest program in North America.
Okay, that was going to be my next question, because I know, like, looking at a lot of actuarial science programs across the nation, a lot of them are newer.
That's right. In fact, if you want me to comment on that a bit, I remember
please.
In the late 80s, in fact, it was 1986. The Jobs Rated Almanac, the annual rating of careers.
Yeah.
I think the name has changed maybe from time to time, but it ranked actuary as #1 profession. And immediately, the number of people taking, it was called Part 1 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
The names of the exams changed.
They all change, yeah.
The calculus and probably anyway. That exam that year, the number of people taking that exam doubled as a result of that. And the things kind of react slowly, but the number of people taking exams and looking to pursue the actuarial profession, just exploded.
Yep.
And it didn't take long for universities, or took, well, not that long for some universities to recognize a market for students wanting to learn this discipline. There were relatively few programs, and Canada has always been sort of more has the influence or the existence of actuarial university programs has always been greater in Canada than the U.S.
Okay.
In Manitoba, Toronto, University of Montreal, Waterloo, but then more have grown up since then. Whereas in the U.S., there, for many years there was Michigan is an older program, University of Wisconsin, and I think Illinois. And that's slowly, the Ball State University in Muncie had been around for a while.
Okay.
And a number of universities started to create actuarial programs.
Yeah.
And that, of course, created demand for faculty, but it was in response to a demand from students to take courses.
And a big part of that, you think, is the rating in the Almanac, #1 rating.
Yeah, that's right, and the rating has stayed up there ever since.
Yeah, because I was gonna say, if you look at the U.S. News and World Report, they always come out with their ratings as well, and actuary has been #1 for several years. I don't know in the last couple years, but I know for several years it was #1.
Certainly in the top 10, usually in the top
Yeah.
5, and often #1.
Yeah. So that's fascinating to hear. I'm curious why you think that Canada has had such kind of a tradition in actuarial science, because I think I've heard that before as well, compared to like maybe the USA. Is it because particular insurance companies that are out there, or do you know why that is?
Well, if I remember the history correctly, the program at the University of Toronto, it wasn't really an official program, but courses have been taught since even the 1870s. There was the Canadian government created not a ministry of insurance, but they brought somebody over from England. The ties to England were very strong. When Confederation in Canada in 1867. It was a peaceful separation. It wasn't a war of revolution. There was more cooperation, and the Canadian government invited or brought over an expert to be the commissioner of insurance, something like that, in the 1870s. And this person wanted to formalize some education, actuarial education, along the lines of the way things were done in England. And so he started teaching courses, or courses began at University of Toronto.
Yeah.
Program. In fact, I have an exam. I have it's from the Department of Mathematics, but it's an exam from the 1880s, 1885 or 8.
Really?
On that exam, it's a math exam, but several of the questions it's a final exam for some math course. Several of the questions use actuarial notation.
Wow.
Annuity and insurance notation. It
Sure.
goes to the late 1800s.
So they're using the A's with the double dots and the ins and the bars and all that.
So I think that's kind of what established things earlier in Canada, an academic tradition. And it was, University of Toronto for a long time. University of Manitoba, I think, started around 1910, something like that. And then University of Michigan was around that time as well.
Okay, yeah.
It was a while later. It was a number of years later, and it was really up until it still is to a certain extent. The actuarial profession is fairly obscure, and it was more obscure before the 1986 jobs rated almanac.
Yeah.
In the late 1800s, it was more obscure still. There weren't that many people working on it. No calculators. I think people used an abacus, and I don't know if you've seen these. There are old tables of compound interest calculations that were used.
Okay, I don't think I've seen those.
The younger generation is going to miss all that. But so again, I think that's what started a tradition a little earlier in Canada. in the U.S.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting because I didn't even hear about the actuarial science career until, I mean, I was a math major in school, and it was like my senior year. I was tutoring at our math center at the school, and they had some actuarial exams in there, and a
Well,
professor
it's not
told me about it. So
right. It's not high on the profile list when it comes to professions.
yeah,
So
yeah, exactly.
I do that a lot. The tradition is greater here, but even so, I've been at University of Toronto for a long time, and not so much now, but for many years, students wouldn't even know about the profession or the program until they were in or near the end of their first year, and they started wondering, what can I do? I like math, but I don't
Sure.
know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they would, but it was right in the calendar. There was a specific, and in fact, maybe that's what drew the students. If for a while, actuarial science was alphabetically was the first program
Okay. Yeah, I could see that.
in the calendar, the handbook, the
Yeah.
calendar of the Faculty of Arts and Science. Now there's an Aboriginal Studies program, so
That comes first.
that comes first. But because we were alphabetically first, some people reading through the calendar would see us first, and then wonder what that was. I
Well, if
suppose.
someone goes to Google and researches average salary for Aboriginal studies versus actuarial science,
Yeah.
that might influence their decision a little bit.
Another, this is unique to University of Toronto, but another something else that drew people into the program was in the late '60s or through the '60s and early '70s. There was something called MPC, Math, Physics, Chemistry, a combination at U of T for people who were interested in the sciences. And one of the requirements in that MPC program was a half course in math of finance. So everybody who
Oh,
studied physics or chemistry or math at that time had, but it was taught. It wasn't taught specifically to prepare people for the actual profession. There was that in mind, but it was taught as a kind of a service that this is something you should know how to calculate your mortgage payment or
yeah, sure, yeah,
what they're doing with interest on your account at the bank
yeah,
and stuff like that. Just sort of more general life skill knowledge.
that makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting. So to go back a little bit, you started talking about kind of the connection between music and math and how you kind of combine the two. Can you give us an idea of do you feel there are similarities between music and math? And I know mainly in the jazz genre
Yeah,
of
more
music.
recession.
And how have you
Well,
kind
I
of
mean, there are.
connected the two?
I think probably what one of the things that in the public consciousness seems to suggest a connection between music and math is that Einstein was an accomplished violinist and pianist.
Okay,
So
yeah.
that must be a connection there. But I'm not a psychologist or an expert on brain science, but maybe the two somehow utilize a similar area of the brain. And people talk about the mathematical structure of some of Bach's music, his counterpoint, his fugue.
Uh-huh.
There's definite patterns in the musical structure, but they're not someone who has studied mathematics deeply. You don't need to know calculus to write a good song.
Yeah,
And you don't have to be a musician, to learn to add and subtract. So
exactly.
I think the connection, there may be some connection in aptitude within the brain, but I don't see a great deal of connection. I was going to say that for the Actuarial Research Conference is coming up. We hosted it in 2015, and so one of the things that I did, when you go to a conference, they hand out swag.
Yeah.
They'll give you I remember at University of Wisconsin, we got a nice umbrella with the University of Wisconsin logo. So I and a few of my fellow musician friends recorded a CD of parody songs related to mathematics and actuarial science and statistics. And I'm
Yeah,
going to
and I got a chance to hear the song, so anyone that can listen to these, they are quite amazing. He is very talented. I was cracking up listening to those.
thank you.
Yes.
So
So there's a connection right there. You combine music and math right in the song.
in a fun way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I tried to make it a fun way.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
one of my role models, of course, is the great unmatchable Tom Lehrer. I don't know if you've heard that name, Tom Lehrer.
It sounds familiar, but I honestly don't know. I can't think of who that
He was
is.
prominent in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. He wrote some of the greatest parody and comedy songs ever. And if you go to YouTube and look him up, he is my inspiration. And in fact,
I'll
I
check them out.
I recorded another CD last year in which I did a cover of one of his songs. He's 91 years old now, and usually when you cover somebody a song, you have to get the rights, you have to
Yeah.
pay royalties, and there's a standard way of doing this. You know, there's a mechanism for finding the publisher and paying them and so on. But Tom Lehrer doesn't have his music published in that way. It's self-published. So a friend of mine who had a connection gave me his phone number, and I phoned him, and he actually answered, and I
Oh, that's
spoke.
amazing.
And I realized that I never really thought much about a bucket list, but I realized that I realized or satisfied the one thing on my bucket list, because I've been a fan of his for 50 years,
Yeah. And
I
you got
got
to talk to him on the phone.
and I asked him if I could record his song, and I actually wrote some additional lyrics to it. And he said, "Yeah, go ahead." He said, "If it sells a lot, send me a check. Otherwise, you know." And he was
That's awesome.
just a terrific guy. Just I was so impressed and really a thrill to talk to him. So he's my inspiration when it comes to that. So if you go on to YouTube or whatever and look up Tom Lehrer, Lehrer, you'll see some really terrific songs.
I will definitely look him up. So then kind of transitioning from, I know we kind of keep bouncing back and forth between actuarial and music, but you've done a lot of different things. And another thing that you've done is you've written a lot of study help guides for the exams. And I know for the FM exam, one of the main SOA reference texts is your book. That's actually how I knew your name. And then the president of ACTEX kind of introduced the two of us, but
Right.
I was like, oh, I know I've seen that name before, and it was from your textbook.
Yeah.
So can you give us an idea of kind of, I mean, the process of actually writing one of those things? How long does it take? And how much are you referencing other textbooks to write your own material?
Okay, well, so I started doing this actually when I was University of Texas, and I was teaching. I had a pretty heavy teaching load, and I had to develop course materials for several different courses, not only FM Math of Finance, but for life contingencies and some risk theory stuff. And as I developed my notes and problem sets and practice exams and so on, I started to create first for the what's the P exam now and FM. I kind of organized everything and for my own use, for my own classroom use, and then I got to know the person who became the president of ACTEX. I met him when I was in Texas, and we talked a little bit about it. He said, "Well, I'm part of he was at Northeastern University, and they wrote some study material for students for some of the upper level exams." He said, "Well, maybe let's see if we can add these to the list." And so I wrote. So we added what was then P and FM to his list, and then as I was writing teaching other courses, I would organize the material, and then thinking about, well, now I have to really be more thoughtful about it because this is going to be used by students who are not in my course. They're just going to be reading it. And so then you have to be careful about organization of the material, what's important, how to present it in a clear and readable way, and so those are the things that really go into it. I sometimes try to think of it, and also when I'm teaching, I try to think of how, if I'm the person listening to this, is this going to be clear enough to me? Try to put myself in the place of being a student, and if what I'm being presented is clear, comprehensive, that's kind of how I approach that.
That makes sense, yeah. And so then you've kind of developed really probably for every associate exam, at least you've developed some sort of a study guide or a text.
Yeah, almost. Well, so, and kind of, as the education system exam structure evolves, there's the what used to be the not the math of finance, but the financial mathematics on derivatives and so on.
Mm-hmm.
I taught that course, but I was involved in other things, and so I just didn't have the time to put together a comprehensive study guide for that topic. So I just stuck
Sure.
with the ones that I already put in time, and I try to keep those up to date. And
with that exam, I was actually wondering, I know a very strong theoretical knowledge of, like, financial math, the derivatives market. Do you play around practically in the stock market? Do you do much yourself with that, or?
I have to say, I've always thought that I should, and then there's always something else to distract me.
Sure.
Yep. The answer is no. I mean, I understand the subject, but I'm not a day trader or
exactly. All right, so we're going to transition because we're already past half an hour here, but I wanted to ask you a couple more quick questions before we're done. What are your thoughts on, with everything happening with automation and artificial intelligence going into the next 20 to 50 years? Do you see the actuarial profession changing in any way, or do you find the needs will change based on automation?
Well, automation has been around for a long time. It was automation when computers first really became seriously available. I remember one of the first languages, APL.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't heard that acronym, APL, which literally stands for a programming language.
Yeah, no, I've heard of that language.
it was a standard for the insurance industry for many years. But so far, I don't think automation has eliminated the need for actuaries. It's changed what they have to know, and I think the profession and the discipline will continue to adapt. As far as AI, I don't know a whole lot about AI, but it seems to me that one of the big issues that will have to be dealt with as time goes on is how to deal with understanding of human genetics and how that will affect insurance. I mean, there's some serious ethical considerations that will come up, or maybe have already come up.
Yes.
And if you're willing to be tested, you and the test comes out pretty good, your insurance rates will be low. But if you end up failing the test, you might not be doing so well. So
right.
It's not clear. I mean, I suppose that it's not so different, or at least somewhat similar to the ethical issue of differentiating between male and female. Should it be unisex insurance rates? Should they be different? And on one side, if women in general live longer than men, their life insurance cost is lower, but their pension cost is higher. And so you lump everything together, or differentiate, and age differentiation, and you can imagine the other differentiations that can take place and the ethical issues that arise.
Yes.
And that's something that will have to be dealt with as time goes on.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I know that both for life insurance and for health insurance as well, I've heard related to genetics and the AI happening around that. It could be very interesting to see where that might go.
I mean, if somebody's it's not inconceivable that your complete genomic structure and a very, very if not precise, but pretty good representation of the risks that a person
will face in their lifetime.
Yeah, that's. I don't know. Some people say the actuaries can tell you when you're going to die. No, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem with it is, like, I mean, if you look at insurance just from a very high level view, kind of the goal of it is to bucket a whole bunch of people together to spread the risk. And the more you start diving in and you start bucketing everything, the more you're kind of destroying that overall concept. But I also see the idea of doing the bucketing. It's just how much do you split a population up?
And that can become an ethical issue.
Yeah. So, okay, another future question. What would you say for any young actuaries watching this that are going into the profession or have just started their career? What would you say is the number one skill they should possess going into 2020?
Boy, oh boy, I don't think there's a number one skill. There's several number one skills. Strong technical ability, strong technical ability, technical, mathematical, a good understanding of the financial world. Very important is for actuaries and others as well, communication skills. We don't, the actuarial programs tend not to emphasize that. We do have a course in communications in our program, but being able to write clearly, communicate your thoughts clearly, both orally and written, organize an argument or a presentation in really a thoughtful and logical way. That's very important, especially people, actuaries, people in business. If you're a consulting actuary, you're making presentations to clients and so on. You want things to be clear and concise.
For sure.
And it's not. I mean, at U of T, and in fact, maybe in U.S. as well, but the actuarial programs and science-related programs, we have a lot of international students, a lot of students from China, from mainland China. English is not their first language, but that's not the issue in communication. The issue in communication is being able to organize thoughts in a cohesive way, and that's independent of one's language.
Yes.
So I think, so students who are really committed, if they're whether English is their first language or second language, they'll learn how to communicate their thoughts. And whether if they're going to stay in North America, probably they have to become more proficient in English. But if they're going to return, to their home country and work in their first language, they still have to be able to communicate well.
Totally.
So I think communication, just more and more feel that we have an advisory board for our actuarial program, made up of about a dozen or so local actuaries. We try to meet once or twice a year, and that is always that comes out sort of high on the priority list.
I mean,
to help your students learn how to communicate.
I would agree with you. Just from my experience of being in the corporate world, I feel like the actuaries who are really good are not always necessarily the smartest in terms of book smart. They are able to communicate like that. That is just in the business world, being able to communicate and clearly state ideas and what you're working on, what you're doing, all sorts of things, presentations. And it's kind of one of those things that I think gets a little undervalued, because the stereotype of an actuary is someone who looks down at his shoes and he never talks to anyone, or he or she never talks to anyone, which is not always the case.
I've seen that in our students who are graduating and searching for a job, and recruiters come, and it isn't necessarily the student with the best GPA that is the student who gets the job. It's a student who can talk and communicate with the recruiter and make it clear that they're capable of relating to people and communicating with people.
Yep. That's strong advice. I like it. All right. On a more fun note, I got two last fun questions for you. I know you like music. I know you like actuarial science and math, but outside of all of that, do you listen to any podcasts, read any books? And if so, what would be your number one podcast or book?
Oh, you know what? A podcast that I was listening to for a while, but I haven't. I tend to read mostly nonfiction. I'll read some fiction. nonfiction, just because I like to know how the universe works. If I can, find a little bit out about that. But there's a magazine called the Skeptics Magazine, and they have a podcast. I think it's still going, but I was listening to it for a while. So that was one of my favorite podcasts. And they sort of, I mean, they sometimes take things a little too far and maybe get a little bit too sarcastic. But they'll go after flat earthers and people like that.
Nice. I'll have to check that one out.
Yeah.
I think I've heard of that one, maybe.
Flat earthers, but I am not a flat earther. I'll just put that on.
I'm not either. I've heard some funny podcasts with people talking about flat Earth stuff. It's just it's crazy. And then a lot of conspiracy theory podcasts out there as well.
Yeah. That's the world we live in, and the means of communication, in particular the internet. It's such an easy way to disseminate information and misinformation of all kinds, or put your point of view across. And so
going on that note, it's kind of scary too with artificial intelligence, and like even this interview we're doing right now, our voices and our faces are out on the internet, and people can do whatever they want with that. It's crazy.
That's true. That's true. And because of technology, you can take images and, like you say, do what you want with them in a way that couldn't be done before.
Yeah.
And people can be presented with total false, a total lie or misinformation, and think that you or I or somebody is responsible for it when it was totally manufactured.
Exactly.
And so, that's something. I hope this is going on in general education today, and in grade school education and high school, to become savvy with the use of information of all kinds, and just be aware of what can be done.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And the generation wise, you get these scam phone calls trying to separate you from your money, whether it's the IRS or the Canadian version of the IRS. And if they're asking you to pay your taxes with iTunes cards, that's probably not the way they collect money generally.
Probably not.
that was the scam that was going around in Canada for a while.
Oh, was it?
We've got your account, and you owe money, and if you don't pay up, you're going to be prosecuted. So here's how to pay up.
Yeah.
And they wanted you to go to a local drugstore and buy a bunch of iTunes cards and pay off your debt with iTunes cards. Probably not the way the federal tax authorities work, but I can't be sure.
Probably not. No, it's crazy. People get so creative with all these scams. I mean, I've gotten phone calls before where it's like you win some hotel stay, and then like one of them, I was just curious what they were going to say, so I stayed on the phone for a little bit, and then of course they're going to start asking for all my information. I'm not going to give it, but it's just it's crazy.
They are creative, and I've had my computer fixed so many times. I don't think it'll ever go wrong again. I don't know if you know that there's another scam. Maybe it's not so prevalent in the U.S. Someone claims to be calling from Microsoft, and that they've detected a problem on your computer.
Really? I haven't heard this one.
They want to fix it, and they want to take you through steps that basically they want you to put something on that's not going to be good for your computer.
Oh, great.
It's not. That's not good.
That is not good.
It's one thing if somebody's just trying to sell you something. It's another thing if somebody's trying to do you harm.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, on the final note, final question for you. I know we've probably discussed most of your hobbies, but do you have any hobbies or things you like to do outside of what we've talked about?
Well, once upon a time, when my physical frame was capable of it, I used to like to do a little more sports. I played baseball for many years.
Oh, nice.
But so some of the creakiness is setting in. I'm hoping that I'll be able to resume some of that at some point. But
you're looking good.
Sports. I followed professional sports fairly closely for a while, but I sort of lost interest. It was fun to see. When things get to the playoffs, it's always exciting because the level of competition is so high. So watching the Raptors. I mean, I don't take any.
I was going to
Personal.
ask if you watched the NBA finals, so
Oh
that was
yeah.
probably fun.
I don't take any personal credit for how they did, although some people seem to. They, well, I didn't do it. The guys on the court did it, not me. And now we've lost our big superstar who was here for 1 year, Kawhi Leonard.
I know, Kawhi, yeah.
He's gone home. He's gonna make a pile of money. Why not?
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
athletes their careers generally aren't as long as academics. So
that is true.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Hey, Sam, I really appreciate you coming on today.
My pleasure. Really
And
fun.
hopefully, if I'm ever out in Toronto, like if I come to the conference or if I'm out there another time, I'm definitely gonna hit you up and
We're doing
maybe
a gig. You can come to a gig, or we'll go to some music or something.
let's do it. That'd be fun. Let's definitely do it.
All right.
Appreciate it again. Thanks for everyone who joined, and we will see you all next time. Next interview is coming up in a little over a week, which I will announce soon. And I hope you all have a good day. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.